All right, what is up, everyone? So today, basically, since there's no Flyers hockey for the foreseeable future, I've decided to try to get some more guests on my channel and for some videos. So today, I've brought on Kevin Durso from 97.3 ESPN. He's a Flyers insider. He's also an editor for Flyerdelphia. I'll put all his stuff in the description below if you want to check him out. So what's up? What's up, Kevin? How are you?
Doing great.
Yeah, so today, me and Kevin were basically just going to be going through the Flyers' bottom six. Now, bottom six this season has been one of the biggest things that's helped the Flyers have the success that they've had for this season. It's been very solid in recent years. To be honest, in recent years, it's been one of the things that's just been kind of like a nuisance to them. They haven't really had that good of a bottom six. They've kind of just had guys that were just like, grinders, enforcers, things like that. Couldn't really get much going. But this season, they've really been good offensively. And the players we're going to be looking at are Derek Grant, Tyler Pitlick, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, Nate Thompson, Connor Bunnaman, Scott Lawton, and Michael Raffle. So, as for Grant this season, obviously he came over with Anaheim at the trade deadline. And Grant this season has 15 goals, 10 assists for 25 points. I believe four of those points are with the Flyers. He's plus one, and he's played 56 games. I've really liked Grant. I think he's been pretty solid. He's a very good penalty killer as well. I think it took him maybe a couple games to get into that rhythm with the Flyers, but I think since then he's really stepped up. I think he's been a really good leader.
Yeah, I thought that his first game was fair. It was unfair to judge him off of that one. He came in and we talked to him after the game too, and he told us all this, this 24-hour whirlwind he was on from getting traded, having to get on a red-eye flight, come back, take one morning skate, and try to play a game.
Right.
So it was kind of natural he wasn't going to look like a perfect fit at that time. But I think since then he's really looked like a really good fit. I like his energy. I like his energy. I like his ability to play well on the forecheck. He's shown some signs where he's a go to the net kind of guy. He's got the size too. I think
Yeah, it
he's
does.
he's got a lot of size, and it's almost deceiving size because I think you see him on the ice and you don't think he's that big. And we got in the room to talk to him after that first game, and he's much bigger than you would think. So,
Yeah,
um,
definitely.
and he put together that little string of games. The last couple, the Boston game and the Buffalo game, he didn't have any points, but he had gone on a 3 game point streak before that and had five over the course of the 3 games, and that was
Hmm.
pretty significant. He scores his first goal, which was a really nice goal against the Rangers. The assists that he had in that game too. The one assist he had in that game was a great setup on a shorthanded goal by another guy we'll be talking about later, Michael Raffle.
Hmm.
And I think what he's been able to do is bring that depth, and the depth that he's brought is very important at this stage of the season. The guys that they would lose to injury over the course of this, the fact that they were able to send down some of these other pieces to the minors and then bring them back when injuries came calling is a big deal because they didn't have that ability in the past. So maybe you make a simple trade, you trade away a guy who's been an AHL lifer in Kyle Criscuolo and a fourth round pick, and you get a guy who's got some good scoring potential, but also plays all
Right.
those other roles that are so important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, I think he's been really good since the trade deadline. I think he's been very good in the Flyers uniform. And another guy who's been very good in the Flyers uniform since really the beginning of coming in and when the Flyers acquired him from trading Ryan Hartman to Dallas is Tyler Pitlick. So this season, Pitlick has 8 goals, 12 assists for 20 points. He's plus 11 in 63 games played. For me, Pitlick has been everything that I thought he would be. I feel like Pitlick is one of those underrated players in this league where he has the skill and he has the size where he could play a first line for some teams in this league. Now, obviously that's kind of a long shot, but again, Pitlick's one of them guys where he never gives up on a play. I notice that a lot. He's just a very physical player. He sets up a lot of good plays, and as I said, he never gives up. And he's also a very good penalty killer when he's out there as well. To me, I think Pitlick's been one of the best flyers on the bottom six this season.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think one of the things that is always telling to me is sometimes I'll tweet out during a game. One of the things I've said about him is that there's not many nights where you sit there and go, he doesn't have the wheels. So you actually are pointing out when they're even more engaged. Like it's like he's got a fifth gear.
Right.
He goes into a totally different gear that you didn't know he had, and it's greater than the average, which is already great to begin with. He's just always an energetic player, and not just in the sense that he's throwing his body around sometimes. He's a very good skill guy. He's got some hidden skill. He reminds me a little bit of Lawton in that sense, where Scott Lawton's a guy who doesn't sometimes get the credit he deserves because he's always been in that bottom six role. And he's able to go out, Pitlick's able to go out and do these things, whether it's, I think about the shot that he took on his goal in Florida a few weeks back. You go, was who knew that he had that in him or whatever. And when you think about the trade too, I think this is it's one of the most valuable trades that Chuck Fletcher made over the offseason. In light of everything else that he had to do, this was the forgotten guy of the offseason. It was
Right.
a guy who nobody would bring up, and he almost didn't make the start of the season. That's how close it was to him missing a couple games with injury. And he had a few moments where I think he was in and out of the lineup, but not many. And since then, he's
Right.
really become a fixture. So I didn't really know what to expect from him going into this year. I almost don't think you can go forward without having a guy like this. I think he's earned himself another contract from this team in the future because he's been such a good player for them from a depth standpoint, from a speed standpoint,
hmm
from a hidden skill standpoint, and from a locker room standpoint.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think all those things, I mean, honestly, like, it's just like you said, like, he definitely does deserve a contract. And if anything, I would just re-sign him to the same thing that he has right now. Because I think it's obviously it's affordable because the Flyers is one of the biggest problems is that they don't have a lot of cap space. They are getting some cap space back, and since they won't be really, or since Nolan Patrick and Oscar Lindbaum really won't be demanding much money since their injuries, again, so the Flyers they might be able to re-sign a couple of these guys, and I think Pitlick, as you said, he's definitely a guy to get another contract in this offseason going into next year. So another guy that I'd like to bring up would be Nicholas Aube-Kubel. I think he's been one of the best Flyers this season. I mean, he's bounced from line to line. I mean, he's played very well this season. He's got 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points. He's plus one, and he's played 36 games. I think he's played really good with the Flyers. I think he's been strong offensively. I think he's had a couple goals that have been timely goals. That one goal versus Columbus in the second game of the 9-game winning streak, goal versus Carolina to put them up 3-1 at home. I think he's made some really good plays, not even just offensively and even on the defensive side of the puck. I think he's made some really good plays as well. I think he's been one of the best Flyers this season as well.
He's easily, without question in my mind, the most underrated Flyer on the team.
Yeah.
He is far and away the most underrated, and I think that's because not a lot of people knew what to expect from him, not just as a part of this team potentially, but within the organization. I think that when the organization changed everything from a management standpoint, new GM, new coach, the thought is that he was on his way out. That was honestly the thought because he wasn't. This was a Ron Hextall pick. It was very much a guy that Hextall went to bat for and kept him kind of around. The call-ups last season sounded like something like that too, and the thought was that the new regime did not have that same affinity for him, and he came in on this opportunity and has run away with it. He is far and away clearly an NHL player now, and he's going to be a fixture of this team well beyond this year. I'm right there with you too on the timely goals. I feel like there's not many goals he scored this year that
Yeah.
haven't been at an important spot or at least been something that looks impressive. He scored his first goal against the Rangers. He scored against Washington in that 7-2 win in
hmm
Washington a few weeks back, and by the score they weren't significant. By
Right.
that point they both made it 5-1, I believe. And
hmm
but yet I look at the play itself and I go, that's a pretty professional play.
Yeah, because both of
That's a
those
sign of an
goals,
NHL.
they were
Yeah,
pretty nice shots.
yeah, that's an NHL level shot. And
hmm
that's part of the. I think that's part of the hidden talent that he has as well that not many people knew about. That there's some of that, but he scored the first goal of the game against San Jose, a goal against Carolina a few games ago.
Right.
That's a big game. The
hmm
Columbus game, or an early first period goal against Florida. Like they're all in
Right.
in situations where you're building that foundation of either getting off to a hot start or trying to come back. He had one against Carolina earlier in the year, which is part of a comeback where they at least got the game to overtime.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
all those things, and I just think even in the game against Boston where they get shut out by a great performance by Tuukka Rask, but he was one of the best players on the ice in my opinion.
Oh
He
yeah.
was far and away playing with as much speed as anybody else. And if there was anybody who looked like they were going to score a goal in that game, it was him for sure. So he's a guy I love watching him play for that reason. I just love watching him play for that reason. I look forward to seeing him play many more years for this team down the road.
Yeah, definitely. And another guy that, like Nate Thompson, this is another guy that I wanted to bring up. He hasn't necessarily, been on the offensive side of the puck, but I think he's had some really good chances. He assisted one of Aube Kubel's goals. It was actually that one versus Carolina at home. I think for me, Thompson's been very good. And I say this because he's been good in the faceoff circle. He's been very good, penalty kill wise. He's been good. I think all around Thompson's been good in the locker room, and he's also there for depth if there's an injury as well. And especially now that he is injured, he's out 2 weeks with a knee strain. Well, he was since that was before the whole season was suspended, and then they ended up calling Connor Bunnaman. So Thompson this season he has 4 goals, 11 assists, 15 points, and he's -1 in 70 games played. Majority of those games being played with Montreal. And then Connor Bunnaman, he has 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points. He's +7 in 21 games played with the Flyers. So again, these two guys, I feel like Bunnaman, he made the team out of camp. I thought he played good, and then I'm getting sent down. It was back when him and Carson Twarynski made the team when the Flyers went over to Prague to play the Blackhawks in the first game of the season. As for Nate Thompson, I feel like Thompson's been very good in different ways where it's like he doesn't make that standout play, but he just does the little things right that it like for me like when I watch a hockey game, it's not always like the big play. It's always like the little things, and these both of these guys do things that I can definitely see being later in the season and even going in the next couple years. Bunnaman, he played. To be honest with you, I believe Bunnaman was up for a while, and then he ended up getting sent back down, and then he played on the fourth line with him. I believe it was Raffle and Aube Kubel, and that was one of the best lines that I thought that the Flyers had, and for a while I think that was one of the lines that if they were struggling on offensively, they were able to like that line was able to piece everything together, and then it was just like they kind of built like a stepping stone for the other three, and then they were able to get their offense going as well.
Yeah, I don't think that you can look at Thompson's numbers and try to weigh that in. I think you've got to
Yeah.
understand that he's a little things kind of guy, and
Hmm.
is going to have to make those. But he is a good faceoff guy. He's a good penalty killer. I know he's gotten significant penalty killing time over the course of since he got to the team, and you need to have those guys too. I went to I remember going to bat for Scott Lawton when that was more his role at the time. And you're going, it doesn't matter that he's not producing like a first round talent does at this given
Right.
moment. His role is fourth line, and you need that guy to eat the most important minutes of the game. And sometimes they are the most important because you're just trying to sustain what you're doing. You either need to get a good shift out of that line that keeps the pressure on, or just get a good defensive shift that doesn't allow anything to come the other way that could change the momentum of the game. And I think that line has collectively done a good job. Thompson's done a good job filling in. And it was kind of I feel like with Bunnaman, it was unfortunate that he had to be one of the pieces that was going to go down. It was obvious that he was going to be. I thought he was
Hmm.
playing really well to that point. And I think about his pedigree coming up from when he was drafted throughout his development to becoming at least a bit of an NHL regular this season. And one of the things with him is, I do think that as a guy in the AHL, if that's more or less where he ends up playing a lot, because he is going to be a lower end guy, he's got the makings of a leader, like a leadership group guy in the AHL. Like he could be a captain of an AHL team down the road, and be a good guy to call up when you're really in need of somebody like that who has that leadership ability. I mean, kind of like Thompson does. Nate
Right.
Thompson was an alternate captain with Montreal. He's got that
Yeah.
leadership quality, even if he's not the most significant player. And I think I see that in Bunnaman. Bunnaman was a captain with the Kitchener Rangers when he was playing juniors. He certainly was on track to being a guy who gets a lot of respect in the minors. And I think a lot of people were respecting the way he was handling himself at the NHL level as well, because he was always working hard and he was always doing what he could to sustain whatever was going on. And they had some good shifts together as a result between, like you said, the guys who were on that line, Raffle and Aube Kubel for a little while, that
Hmm.
they were putting together some really good stuff over the course
Yeah.
of several games in a row. And it was early in the winning streak too. Early in the
Yeah,
winning
it
streak before
was.
the deadline came up, they were keeping it going, and you didn't feel like there was any threat coming against you the other way. So yeah, he was a big surprise for me out of training camp, and just
Yeah,
because
he
I don't
was
think
to me
anybody
too.
I kind of Twerinsky wasn't as much of a surprise because I remembered his training camp from the year before was good, and I wasn't too surprised to see that Farabee and Frost were knocking on the door a little bit. But Bunneman was one who was kind of off the radar, who surprised a lot of people and made you start to realize as it really wound down, he's going to end up being part of this team. And I don't think anybody would have expected, not only from the beginning, because obviously in the beginning it was, well, he's kind of the fill-in for maybe when Nolan Patrick comes back, who knows? They needed a fourth line center, and they kind of had to bump everybody up. Scott Lawton was moved up. That was at the very beginning of the year, and then as everything progressed on, and he had other injuries, he fell right into place as a fourth line guy, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the guys that these next two guys that we're going to bring up, Sky Lawton and Michael Raffle. These have been guys that have been with the team for so long, and just like you said, Lawton, he kind of struggled a little bit early on in his career. He was a high draft pick, drafted as a goal scorer, and then he kind of just like came in, and he was kind of put in that fourth line, third line role. He's been a very good penalty killer, good face-off man. But this season, I think Lawton's been one of the best players this season. He has great chemistry with Kevin Hayes, Travis Konecny. It was a line that was put together a while. Sadly, that line had to get breaking up. And I believe that was a couple games back. But again, like Lawton's been one of them guys where he's kind of like Albert Kubel with timely goals because Lawton he's had a couple timely goals this season. That one versus Ottawa where he got the rebound, that was one of the big goals of the season in
Hmm.
my opinion. I mean to me I feel like Lawton's been very good as of last season. Lawton had 12 goals, 20 assists for 32 points. This season, he had 13 goals, 14 assists for 27 points. He broke his goal streak. He broke that was actually his most career goals in a season with 13. And he's also plus 13 this season. Last season, he was minus 11. So and again, the team last season wasn't great either. So you can obviously throw the minus to that the team being pretty bad as well. But again. To me, I feel like Lawton's been very good, not even just on the offensive side of the puck, defense as well. And I think one of the biggest things that makes that so good too is the way that the way, not even just the way Lawton is on the penalty kill, the whole penalty kill itself, because the penalty kill just really just took like a whole 180 from last season, as the special teams for the Flyers were just awful last year, to be honest with you. And like 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 this season, the penalty kill's really been good all year. It's had its moments where it wasn't that great. Power play, it's struggled at times, but as of lately, it's been really good. Started to heat up in that second game of the back-to-back versus the Rangers. They had three. Was it two or three power play goals? I believe it was two. But again,
In the second
it
half of
was
the
three.
back to back, it was
Yeah, it
three.
was
Yeah.
three, right? Yeah, and and again, as for Raffle, I think he's had a really good season. He's this season he's got 8 goals, 12 assists for 20 points. He's minus two in 58 games played. Both of these guys, they both had the same injury as well, so they came back from that. They both broke their fingers. But again, to me, I feel like both of these guys have been really good for the Flyers. They're good veteran leaders, and Raffle, he's a guy that can play with anyone. In years past, he's played on the first line. I mean, and really for this year, he's played on the second, third, fourth line. He's played all over the ice, and that's really the same thing with Scott Lawton as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the plus minus with Lawton. And even though plus minus is not a great stat to use to
Mm-hmm.
evaluate, this is the first time he's been a plus player in his career. And
Mm-hmm.
that's telling to me. I think that he's improved so much from that defensive side as the year over the years. And then I look at the number of games he's played too. He sets his career high in goals in 49 games because of the injury.
Right.
And he played a full 82 game schedule last season, which was a first for him. He had missed one game the year before, and then the rest was there's some form of an injury somewhere along the line down the road. Actually, the one year he barely played in Philly because he was just stuck in the minors for so long
Right.
and had injury trouble, things like that. So I don't mind these 5 points below his career mark for this year in 49 games when he was going to surpass it clearly. I
Yeah.
mean, over the course of the rest of it, because he's been such a key player for that line and just
Mm-hmm.
and in general, he can play anywhere. He can, I think that I'll take the same camp as Elaine Vigneault, and I like him on the wing a lot better than I do at center sometimes
Yeah.
because I think he's able to deliver a lot more from that position.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of everything else, I think that he's just overall he's improved. I keep calling him kind of an underappreciated part of the team. I remember back when news of him re-signing came out, and he was one of three players left unsigned, and the two that were left standing after his contract was signed were the two biggest free agents they had left. It was Ivan Provorov, Travis Konecny, and everybody was kind of just waiting for that. And I kept getting comments like, why? And I'm like, why? Because and maybe one of the teams that I reference a lot because they've had so much success over the years is Boston. And I go, have you seen what Boston's fourth line looks like? Those
Hmm.
players matter just as much as the top line does. They
Right.
get the depth scoring from those guys.
Hmm.
So I always appreciated him as a player on this team because of the fact that he does supply those things, and he's turned it in. He's made it so much better now. His last 2 years have been significantly better than his previous parts of his career. He's looked more like that player who has the scoring potential to go with it. And I think that the fact that the defensive side has come around so much, whether that's playing the wing with Kevin Hayes, who's a great defensive forward in his own right,
Right.
or or just having a better team behind you as well, or in front, all over the place around you. He's got better. He's playing with better forwards. They've got better defensemen behind him, and the goaltending's been better. So that can help your plus minus number shift in a big way too, and that's why such a dramatic shift from a minus 11 with a team that didn't seem like it had near as much talent to a team
Right.
that has a lot of talent, and you're a plus 13. In Raffles' case, I think of Raffle too, and as he's another guy who gets placed a lot of different places. You know, it's really hard to look at anybody. I mean, it's significant when you can sit there and say that anybody who was to go out with an injury at any point was a tough loss. That's a big significant thing too. You can probably survive without a guy like Raffle sometimes when he has an injury, but you realize that the cohesiveness of the team and the
Hmm.
lines that he's able to play on do matter too. So
Yeah.
he's still able to produce at a good rate, even though he's playing in this very specific role. And I do like him as obviously I like him as a penalty killer. I think he
Yeah,
shows that sign
definitely.
before. And I thought that one of the things I liked about the penalty kill, going back to the first guy we talked about, is I thought he had good chemistry with Derek Grant on the penalty kill when he played
Yeah,
together.
that is true.
I think that's a great thing to start, especially for a guy who just got here
Hmm.
5, 6 games ago. And realistically, I think they connected on that shorthanded goal
Yeah. Versus
three
the
games
Rangers.
into Grant, 3 games into Grant's career with the Flyers, and look at what they're able to do in just 3 games with a couple of practices under their belt. Like they really looked the part. So I think that every single one of these guys that we've talked about has an important role, and it's what made them such a good team this year. Is
Hmm.
there's so many nights that I end up coming out of a game, whether I'm watching it from home because it's a game that was on the road, or whether I'm in the building because it was a home game, and I'm finding myself more often this season than not thinking about how it wasn't one of the star players that I'm thinking about most as a player who did the most things for the team. I'm
Right.
thinking about a Tyler Pitlick or a Scott Lawton or any of those guys or Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and I'm going, that's the guy who really showed me
Stood out.
something,
Hmm.
stood out, and did and led the production. I
Right.
I know it's pretty telling when a guy like Sean Couturier, who was relied upon for so many years to be one of the guys, just like Claude Giroux and just like Jake Voracek, is able to say, "I think this is one of the best years of depth we've had in a long time." And they've kind of said in years past, "Oh, I think we think we have pretty good depth," and I don't know how much they truly meant that or were just trying to
Hmm.
say the right thing. I think they really mean that this time around. They mean it when they can say Scott Lawton's on the third line and Michael Raffles on the third or fourth line and Aube-Kubel can jump up in there and looks every bit of the part, and so does Bunneman and all these new guys and all these younger players too who have stepped into these roles and look every bit the part. I think that that's what they feel the most is that they actually can put a lot more on those guys and there's a balance. Sean Couturier was playing 23, 24 minutes a game in years past, and all of a sudden, leading up to a few of these games where they're maybe not like the Boston game where they're trailing throughout, but in games where they get a lead, they're able to rest these guys. They're playing 18
Right.
minutes a night, and it's keeping the whole team fresher. And it's what's setting up at least before everything else with this week. It was what was setting up what looked like it was going to be a significant playoff run because they were actually in a position where they felt comfortable with where they were in the standings, at least from that standpoint of making the playoffs, and
Right.
they were able to actually balance the lines out so that the players were more rested and they didn't have probably as much of the wear and tear injuries that you get that you play through, and it was
Hmm.
just these few significant ones where you go someone JVR breaks a finger and Nate Thompson's got a knee strain and stuff like that.
Phil
So
Myers as
and
well.
Phil Myers with the broken kneecap. Okay, it happens, and those are injuries that happen. And in Phil Myers' case, they happen from doing the right little things you have to do to win
Yeah.
games, and it's
Blocking
just
that shot.
unfortunate. Right, it's a big shot block, and
Oh yeah.
when it happens, you see that it could be significant pain, and you see how he was afterwards, and it's unfortunate that it comes to that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean,
at
as
least they
for
had it.
Myers, he went right to the bench.
Yeah, and but at least they have the guys backing that up.
Hmm.
There's when JVR goes down, they go into the system. They call up Joel Farabee and decide not only are they calling him up, but we're going to move him to the second line and bump Lawton down because it's going to create a different balance. I liked that move.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
so did I.
as much as I like Lawton on the line with Hayes and Konechny, I think that you made your third line, that energy line, heavier. You put Lawton
Yeah.
with a Pitlick and a Derek Grant, and all of a sudden you've got a pretty hefty line there in terms of guys who play with energy, guys who are willing to throw their body around too and get physical with the opposing team. So
Hmm.
those are all things that I like about those guys, and I think that this has been such a key part of the success of this team is that they have more than three guys that they can turn to up front that they
Hmm.
feel like can actually produce.
Yeah, definitely, and it's funny because like how you bring up Phil Myers, and another thing is too like with having depth in the offense part, you also have depth in the defense as well. When a guy like Phil Myers goes down, you can bring up Shane Gostisbehere, who's the
Mm-hmm.
guy that and like with the Flyers in the whole Flyers case and with the fans and everything, wanting to trade Shane Gostisbehere at the trade deadline, them not trading him, that's why this situation made it perfect because Myers goes down, you're able to bring up Ghost, you have more depth as well, and and and, and then they're able to call Mark Freeman, who's been a solid seventh defenseman as well.
Mm-hmm.
He adds some more space into that defense, and then say someone else gets hurt, God forbid, because oh God, I'd be so annoyed if that happened on the defensive end, another injury that would just kill them. But again, the bottom six and the depth that the Flyers have had this season has just been unreal. And again, Kevin, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It was a good time talking to you.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
All right, guys. So again, my podcast articles, those links are on my channel. And again, if you guys want to check out this sweet hoodie by East Philly Designs with the gritty and artwork here, I will put a link to that in the description. You can use my promo code FFM93 for 10% off anything on the website. So again, podcast articles, those links are on my channel. Hope you guys enjoy this one. I'll see you guys in the next one, and goodbye.